Growing up, I can't say I was a Scott Pilgrim fan. Having never read the original comics, I was part of the generation that was first exposed to Scott Pilgrim watching the 2010 film Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. And I didn't actually see the film in cinemas, but instead watched the film in bits and pieces at school when our teachers decided to put it on whenever it was near the holidays. And I gotta say, it was a pretty enjoyable experience at the time. I remember the visuals were interesting and the video gamey and comic book aesthetics was a nice touch. The whole premise of fighting 7 evil exes was kind of cool, and it definitely was a way different experience to anything I'd seen. But unfortunately, that was the end of that. I kind of forgot about the whole thing for a long time and didn't really think about it too much. That is until this year, when Scott Pilgrim Takes Off was first announced. I remember thinking, oh, that's kinda cool, but it's probably just gonna be the same experience again, or perhaps even worse, since Netflix is adapting some beloved franchise that has a dedicated fan base, and that has always worked out questionably. But then a few weeks after that, I read an article about how Science Saru was going to be animating the show, and that piqued my interest. Science Saru is a Japanese anime studio that has produced some of my favorite pieces of film and TV throughout my time watching anime, like Ride Your Wave, Inu-Oh, The Night is Short, Walk On Girl, Devilman Crybaby, and is going to animate the highly anticipated series Dan Da Dan. With this sort of support behind Scott Pilgrim Takes Off, I decided to jump right back into the crazy world of Scott Pilgrim once again.
It's time to wake up, dude.
I had a dream about that girl again.
And damn, maybe I did miss out when I was a kid. The series starts out largely the same as I remember in the film. It's set in Toronto. Scott Pilgrim, the bass player, falls in love with the titular Ramona Flowers, and the 7 evil exes target Scott as Ramona's new boyfriend-to-be. However, when Matthew Patel interrupts a concert to fight Scott, Scott suddenly disappears, and he stays that way for most of the show. Now at that point, I was kind of confused. I clearly remember Scott being a big part of the movie when I watched it as a kid, and was genuinely surprised that they actually switched up the plot. Ramona is now the main character of the series, and the plot is driven by her search for Scott and what happened. That to me was pretty interesting and a fresh take on the series. In my opinion, it was a cool direction that the show went to, and still kept the whole vibe and tone of the film. The show also explored a lot of characters in ways that I didn't really even know needed exploring. There was quite a bit of character development on a lot of the 7 evil exes that I do not remember happening in the film, and if they did, they clearly didn't impact my younger self enough to remember. Additionally, having Ramona confront all her evil exes and then moving on from Ramona one by one was actually kind of cool to see. Instead of keeping the simplistic nature of the whole defeat the 7 evil exes, it sort of embarked on a journey of self-discovery for each of the characters, and some characters and story arcs really resonated with me in ways that I didn't really expect. The visuals were no joke as well. Science Saru did a great job with the show in my opinion, managing to capture the original art style of the comics and animating them in a way that kept the heart and soul of what made Scott Pilgrim Scott Pilgrim. It's no Jujutsu Kaisen, but honestly the visuals were serious when they needed to be, but adoring and cute in a way in its simplicity other times. If I had to put it simply, it just fits so well with the story it was trying to tell. When the whole thing was done, I actually found myself a bit sad. At first I thought the whole thing ended a bit abruptly, with everything just sort of getting solved in the last 2 episodes and most of the plot points just magically tying themselves together. But then I slowly came to the realization that that wasn't really the point of Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. After some thinking, I think Scott Pilgrim Takes Off was never really about Scott, or the 7 evil exes, or even Ramona for that matter. I think Scott Pilgrim Takes Off was a neat little story about making sure to live in the moment, not regret your past, and not take life too seriously sometimes. Stuff happens, and everyone processes that in a different way, whether it be wacky ways that the show presents all the exes, Scott himself, and Ramona, or the real-life, less exaggerated equivalents of those. The show did a great job highlighting the ups and downs of relationships, the complex dynamics that one has to balance with one's own emotions, and the importance of moving on sometimes in a lighthearted and entertaining way. Even with all the fantastical, crazy things that happened, the themes and ideas presented still managed to remain grounded in reality. Scott Pilgrim Takes Off, in my opinion, isn't out there trying to break any boundaries in storytelling, character development, or anything for that matter. And honestly, I think that's okay. It did what it needed to do very well, and sometimes that's just enough. If you're looking to satisfy your needs on some dramatic tale of action and drama, then Scott Pilgrim Takes Off won't really do anything for you. It's an excellent show just to kick back, have a couple drinks, watch with some friends, have a laugh, and hey, you might get yourself some of the best 4 hours of downtime you could ask for.